Okay, so it's December again.
Yeah.
And that means we're all going to be hearing about Ebenezer Scrooge.
Yeah.
And, the ghosts of Christmas past, present, and future. And,
Right.
but, I was thinking about this the other day, and it's kind of a weird thought, but
Yeah.
what if a Christmas carol like the Dickens story,
Right.
it has some kind of a deep connection with like a 16th century Spanish mystic?
That's interesting.
I know, right? Like, it's so weird to think about.
Yeah, it sounds strange on the surface.
Yeah.
But I think it's a brilliant idea to connect the two because
Yeah.
Dickens was really exploring, the ideas of morality and how
Yeah.
people change.
Right.
And then you have St. John of the Cross, who's this intense
Right.
mystic writing about the soul and its journey to God.
Yeah. So in this deep dive, we're going to look at A Christmas Carol,
Right.
and we're going to look at St. John of the Cross's Dark Night of the Soul.
Okay.
Now, I know a lot of people, when they hear Dark Night of the Soul,
Yeah.
they think, oh, I'm depressed.
Right.
Or I'm just feeling down about my faith.
Yeah.
But what we're going to see today is that the Dark Night of the Soul is something much bigger,
It is, yeah.
much richer.
It's about transformation.
Yeah.
It's about confronting
Right.
the difficult things inside of us
Yeah.
and in the world.
And our listeners might be thinking,
Yeah.
what does this have to do with me?
Yeah.
Well, we think this is going to give you a whole new perspective
Right.
on how you deal with challenges in your own life,
Okay.
and especially challenges in your faith.
Right.
So that's what we're going to look at today.
Okay, so we're going to be talking about purification
Yeah?
and transformation
Right.
and how both of these books, Dark Night of the Soul and A Christmas Carol,
Yeah.
really show us that there's this journey that we have to go on
Right.
where we have to let go of the things that are holding us back.
Okay. So first, I
Yeah.
think it would help our listeners to know,
Okay.
what is Dark Night of the Soul?
Okay, so Dark Night of the Soul.
Yeah.
It was originally a poem.
Okay.
And then St. John of the Cross wrote these long commentaries on it in 2 books.
Right.
And it's about the soul's journey to God.
Okay.
But the thing is, this dark night,
Yeah.
it's not just about suffering.
Right.
It's about God purifying the soul.
Okay.
It's about stripping away all the things that we rely on
Yeah.
so that we can actually grow in faith, hope, and love.
Okay. Now, this might seem really different from A Christmas Carol.
Right.
Like we go from this mystical treatise
Right.
to a Victorian ghost story.
Yeah.
But they actually share this theme of how people change.
Yeah, they do.
And it's about this deep change that comes from realizing who you really are
Right.
and
Right.
letting go of all the things that you thought were important.
And the things that are actually holding you back.
Yeah. So what's this connection then between the Dark Night
Right.
and what
Right.
happens to Scrooge?
Well, both stories start with this disruption.
Yeah.
In the Dark Night of the Soul, it's when the soul gets shaken out of its comfortable, even kind of lazy way of being.
Okay.
And Scrooge,
Yeah.
he's stuck in his routine.
Right.
He's this miser.
Yeah.
He's isolated.
Yeah.
He's all about money.
Yeah.
And then, bam, Marley's ghost shows up.
Yeah.
And it just shakes up his entire world.
It does.
So you can see how Scrooge is kind of like stuck
Yeah.
in this spiritual rut.
Right.
And that's what the Dark Night does. It breaks you out of that.
Yeah. And then the soul starts to detach from the world.
Right.
And from all the sensory pleasures that it was enjoying.
Right.
And we see that with Scrooge too.
Uh-huh.
He has to face his past,
Yeah.
his present,
Yeah.
and this terrifying future.
Yeah.
And it's not just scary.
Right.
It's actually breaking down
Yeah.
all the things he thought were important.
Right.
Like his money
Uh-huh.
and his power.
Yeah.
And he sees that he's all alone
Yeah.
and that his greed has hurt people.
That's a big part of the Dark Night, too. It's this feeling that God has withdrawn, and it can be really scary.
Right.
But it's actually God purifying the soul.
Okay.
He's trying to get us to stop relying on just our emotions and our feelings
Yeah.
and to move into a deeper faith.
Okay.
And you see that with Scrooge's journey with the ghosts.
Yeah.
It's not all warm and fuzzy.
Yeah.
He's terrified.
Yeah,
He's
yeah.
confused. He's being humbled.
Right.
And that's what has to happen.
Yeah.
He has to be broken down
Yeah.
so that he can be rebuilt.
And St. John of the Cross says that after this
Yeah.
comes a feeling of sorrow
Right.
and remorse.
A huge part of the Dark Night
Yeah.
is this contrition.
Yeah.
It's when the soul realizes
Yeah.
how much it's messed up
Right.
and how much it needs God.
And we see that with Scrooge. He
Absolutely.
cries over Belle.
Yeah.
He regrets how he treated Bob Cratchit.
Mm-hmm.
He wants to change everything.
Yeah.
He sees how empty he
He
is.
sees his spiritual poverty, which is what has to happen
Yeah.
before you can be filled with God's grace. And the goal of all of this, the
Yeah.
goal of the Dark Knight,
Yeah.
is to transform you,
Okay.
to make you into a person of love and humility,
Yeah.
to bring you into union with God.
Okay.
And you see that so clearly
Yeah.
in Scrooge's transformation on Christmas morning.
Yeah.
He's like a completely different person. He's
Yeah.
full of joy.
Yeah.
He's like a child again. He's
Yeah.
generous. He's
Okay.
he's living out the love and humility that he
Right.
was so lacking before.
Yeah.
He's gone through his dark night
Yeah.
and come out into the light.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got the three ghosts.
Right?
Now, in Carmelite spirituality,
Mm-hmm.
there's this idea of guides,
Yeah.
like people who help you through the dark night.
Right.
So could we see the three ghosts as guides for Scrooge?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
The Ghost of Christmas Past.
Yeah.
He's kind of like a spiritual director.
You know, he's helping Scrooge to look back on his life
Yeah.
and to see where he went wrong.
Right.
And it's painful for Scrooge,
Yeah.
but it's necessary.
Right.
He has to see those things
Yeah.
in order to heal.
Okay.
So the Ghost of Christmas Past
Yeah.
is helping Scrooge to purify his memory.
Okay, what about the Ghost of Christmas Present?
Right, so the Ghost of Christmas Present,
Yeah.
he's showing Scrooge
Yeah.
the world outside of his little bubble.
Yeah.
He's showing him the joy
Oh,
and
yeah.
the suffering of others,
Yeah.
especially the Cratchit family.
Right.
And this is really important
Okay.
because it's expanding Scrooge's heart.
Right.
It's making him feel compassion,
Yeah.
which he didn't have before.
Yeah, he was so indifferent.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, and then we get to the Ghost of Christmas Yet to Come,
Oh, yeah.
which is so scary.
Terrifying.
Right.
But this is like the deepest part of the Dark Night.
Okay.
You know, it's when you're confronted with death,
Right.
with judgment, with the possibility of utter despair.
Yeah.
But even in that,
Yeah.
the goal is still purification.
Okay.
It's about stripping away
Yeah.
Scrooge's fear of death
Yeah.
and turning his will towards
Yeah.
love.
Right. So how does Scrooge's transformation at the end connect to St. John of the Cross?
Well, St. John of the Cross has this famous saying,
Okay.
the soul, having emptied itself of all that is not God,
Yeah.
becomes capable of being filled with him.
Right.
And that's exactly what happens to Scrooge.
Yeah.
He lets go of his obsession with money.
Yeah.
He's filled with love for others.
Right.
He's generous.
Yeah.
He's humble.
Right.
He's even childlike in his joy.
Right.
He's gone from isolation
Yeah.
to this beautiful union with the spirit of Christmas,
Right.
which is
Yeah.
all about love and charity.
So Christmas morning is like the dawn
Yeah,
after his dark night.
right.
Yeah.
It's so interesting that Dickens
Yeah.
was able to tap into these deep Christian truths.
Right. Without even knowing about St. John of the Cross.
Right.
I mean, A Christmas Carol.
Yeah.
It's about so much more than just being nice at Christmas.
Right.
It's about the fact that sometimes we have to suffer
Yeah.
to really change.
Right.
And it's about the power of love over death.
Right.
Think about Marley's chains
Yeah.
versus Tiny Tim's spirit.
Yeah.
One is all about selfishness.
Yeah.
The other is all about love.
Yeah. And I'm sure St. John of the Cross
Yeah.
would have seen Scrooge's story
Yeah.
as God working in his life,
Right.
even though it was painful.
Even though it was a dark night.
Okay, so let's get into some specific scenes.
Okay.
What are some of the moments in A Christmas Carol
Right.
that really stand out
Okay.
when we look at them through this lens?
Okay, so first we have Marley's ghost.
Right.
And he says, I wear the chain I forged in life.
Yeah.
I made it link by link and yard by yard.
Yeah.
And that's such a powerful image
Yeah.
of how our attachments weigh us down. And St. John of the Cross talks about this too.
Okay.
He says that souls are encumbered with many attachments.
Yeah.
And he says that the soul that is attached to anything,
Yeah.
however much good there may be in it,
Yeah.
will not arrive at the liberty of divine union.
So Marley's like the example of
Yeah.
what happens when you don't let go
Right.
of those attachments.
Okay, what about the ghost of Christmas past?
Yeah.
And all those memories that Scrooge has to relive.
Yeah.
The book talks about this light
Okay.
coming from the ghost,
Yeah.
and it shines on everything,
Yeah.
and it makes Scrooge remember all these things,
Right.
these
Yeah.
lost loves,
Yeah.
these missed opportunities.
Yeah.
And it's beautiful, but it's also painful
Yeah.
because he can't change the past.
Right.
But this is how the Dark Knight starts.
Okay.
It starts with this purification of memory.
Right.
It's not about dwelling on the past and feeling bad.
Right.
It's about seeing the truth of your actions
Right.
and how they've affected you. And others, as St. John of the Cross says,
Yeah.
the soul must be brought to see clearly
Yeah.
how it has not served God but itself.
Yeah. And then there's that scene with Belle
Oh, yeah.
where she
Yeah.
breaks off their engagement.
Yeah, she says to him,
Yeah.
another idol has displaced me, a golden one.
Right.
And that is exactly what St. John of the Cross is talking about.
Okay.
When he talks about inordinate attachment.
Okay.
It's when you love something,
Yeah.
even something good like financial security,
Yeah.
more than you love God.
Right.
Or more than you love other people.
And Scrooge chose money
He did.
over Belle.
And that was his downfall.
Right.
Because for St. John of the Cross,
Yeah.
even good things can be bad
Yeah.
if they get in the way of your relationship with God.
So he's saying that sometimes we have to let go
We do.
of even the things that we think are good
Yeah.
in order to find God.
And that's what the Dark Knight is about.
Right.
It's about letting go of everything so that you can be free.
Right.
And St. John of the Cross says,
Okay.
if a man wishes to be sure of the road he treads on,
Yeah.
he must close his eyes and walk in the dark.
Wow.
So sometimes
Yeah.
you have to let go of what you think you see to
Right.
actually find your way.
Okay. And then the Ghost of Christmas Present
Right.
shows Scrooge all this joy and suffering.
Yeah, he takes him to the Cratchit family.
Right.
And they're poor,
Yeah.
but they're full of love. And
Yeah.
this is where Scrooge starts to change.
Okay.
He starts to feel compassion.
Right.
He starts to want something more
Yeah.
than just money.
Right.
And St. John of the Cross says,
Yeah.
the soul is purged and enlightened in the darkness so
Right.
that it may be united with God in love.
Yeah.
So the Ghost of Christmas Present is showing Scrooge
Yeah.
that there's more to life than just himself.
Yeah. Okay, now the Ghost of Christmas yet to come.
Right. This is the scary one.
Yeah.
He shows Scrooge his own death
Yeah.
and Tiny Tim's death. Right.
And it's terrifying,
It is.
but it's also the deepest part of the Dark Knight.
Okay.
It's when you face the ultimate reality
Right.
of what your life
Mhm.
could be
Yeah.
if you don't change.
Right.
But even in that darkness,
Yeah.
there's a flicker of hope
Okay.
because Scrooge starts to feel remorse.
Yeah.
He starts to want to change.
Right.
And St. John of the Cross says,
Yeah.
when the soul reaches the point of greatest darkness,
Yeah.
it is nearest to the dawn.
Wow. And then we get to Christmas morning
Yeah.
and Scrooge's transformation.
Right. He wakes up and he shouts,
Yeah.
I am as light as a feather. I am as happy as an angel.
Yeah.
And that's what it's like
Right.
to come out of the dark night.
Yeah.
You're free.
Right.
You're full of joy.
Yeah.
And Scrooge's actions show this.
Yeah.
He's generous.
Yeah.
He's humble.
Right.
He's living out this transformation
Yeah.
that St. John of the Cross talks
He
about
is, yeah.
when he says,
The soul is transformed in God through love and
Love.
lives no longer for itself, but for him.
okay, so we see how Scrooge goes through all this pain.
Yeah.
Was that really necessary?
It was because
Okay.
his pain
Yeah.
was what led to his redemption.
Okay.
He had to die to his old self
Yeah.
to be reborn.
Right.
And at the beginning of the story,
Yeah.
he thinks he's so self-sufficient.
Yeah.
He thinks money is everything.
Right.
But that's a delusion.
Right.
And St. John of the Cross says,
Yeah.
the soul that is proud and self-satisfied
Yeah.
must be emptied and wounded before
Yeah.
it can be filled with God.
Right.
So Scrooge's pain, it was actually a form of illumination.
Okay.
It showed him the truth
Yeah.
that he couldn't see before.
Right.
And St. John of the Cross says, God leads the soul into darkness
Yeah.
so that it may be taught what it could never learn in the light.
Wow.
And that pain,
Yeah.
it stripped away all of Scrooge's false attachments. His money,
Yeah.
his isolation, his
Yeah.
need to control everything.
Right.
As St. John of the Cross says, the soul must be emptied of all that is not God,
Yeah.
or it cannot be filled.
So Scrooge's rebirth on Christmas morning,
Yeah,
it's the result of his dark night.
it is.
It's amazing.
What?
St. John of the Cross wrote about the dark night.
Yeah.
O night more lovely than the dawn.
Yeah.
O night that joined the beloved with the lover.
Yeah.
The lover transformed in the beloved.
Wow. So there's no resurrection
Yeah.
without death.
Right.
And Scrooge had to die to his old self
Yeah.
to be reborn in love.
And love enters through wounds.
It does.
So can you imagine St. John of the Cross reading A Christmas Carol? What would he think?
I think he would be amazed
Yeah.
to see how Dickens was
Yeah.
able to capture
Yeah.
the soul's journey
Right.
in this story.
Right.
He would see Scrooge at the beginning as this spiritually dead man
Yeah.
full of pride and lacking love.
Right.
And then Marley's ghost
Yeah.
and the three spirits.
Yeah.
That's the beginning of the Noche Oscura.
Yeah.
The dark night of the soul.
Right.
Waking Scrooge up with sorrow and pain.
Right.
But it's all for his good.
Right.
It's this painful grace
Yeah.
that's stripping away
Yeah.
all the things that are keeping him
Yeah.
from God.
Right.
And the visions that he sees,
Yeah.
they're purifying his memory
Right.
and his intellect.
Mm-hmm.
And the ghost of Christmas yet to come,
Yeah.
that's the second night.
Okay.
That's the refining fire
Yeah.
that makes him ready for
Wow.
union with God.
And then Christmas morning.
Yeah. That's the dawn after the night.
Right.
And Scrooge is full of humility
Yeah.
and love.
Yeah.
And I think St. John of the Cross would say
Yeah.
that this story is a parable of the soul's ascent to God. And that we should all be willing to enter into the night
Yeah.
without fear, because that's where the beloved is waiting.
Okay, so we've been talking about the dark night of the soul.
Right.
And I know a lot of people think it's just about feeling down or not feeling close to God.
Or just having a bad day.
Right.
But it's so much more than that for St. John of the Cross.
Yeah.
The dark night.
Yeah.
It's this process of suffering that God allows to transform us.
Right.
It's not a punishment.
Right.
It's not just depression. It's
Right.
a gift,
Okay.
even though it's painful.
Okay.
It's like surgery.
Okay.
God is cutting away
Yeah.
the things that are hurting us,
Yeah.
the things that are keeping us from him.
Right.
And St. John of the Cross says, the soul that is attached to anything,
Yeah.
even a single thread,
Yeah.
will not reach divine union.
Wow.
So think about Scrooge.
Yeah.
He was attached to so many things.
Yeah. Yeah.
His money, his power,
Yeah.
his isolation.
Yeah.
And he had to be stripped of all of that to be free.
Yeah.
And when he wakes up on Christmas morning, he
Yeah.
says, I don't know anything. I'm quite a baby.
Yeah.
He's like a newborn. He's starting over.
Yeah.
And that's what the dark night can do for us. It can make us new.
Right.
It can purify us
Yeah.
so that we can be filled with God.
And so the point is that even suffering
Right.
can be a sign of God's presence.
Yeah.
It can be his way of drawing us closer to him.
Right.
And St. John of the Cross has this beautiful image
Yeah.
of the dark night.
Yeah.
He says, "O guiding night."
Yeah. O night, more lovely than the dawn.
Yeah.
The beloved transformed in the lover.
Wow.
So the darkness might not be something to fear. It
Yeah.
might be God's way of pulling us forward.
Okay, so we've seen how the three ghosts
Right.
act as guides for Scrooge.
Yeah.
But what about the other character?
Yeah.
They seem to play a role too.
They do. Every character is like an instrument
Okay.
in God's hands,
Yeah.
helping to transform Scrooge.
Okay, like Jacob Marley.
Right.
He's already gone through his own dark night.
Yeah, in the afterlife.
Right.
And he comes back
Yeah.
to warn Scrooge,
Right.
to challenge his pride,
Yeah.
and to show him
Right.
what could happen if
Yeah.
he doesn't change.
Yeah, and he says,
Yeah.
mankind was my business.
Yeah.
And that's like a judgment,
Yeah.
but it's also a mercy
It is.
because it's waking Scrooge up.
Right.
And then the ghost of Christmas past,
Yeah.
he helps Scrooge to see his past
Right.
in a new light.
Yeah. He challenges his nostalgia
Yeah.
and his bitterness,
Right.
and he helps him to purify his memory.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
Bill,
Yeah.
she's the one who shows him
Yeah.
the cost of choosing money over love.
Right.
She's like, his conscience.
Right. Reminding him of who he used to be
Yeah.
and who he could have been if he hadn't chosen greed.
Okay, the ghost of Christmas present,
Yeah.
he's all about compassion.
Yeah. He shows Scrooge the beauty
Yeah.
of simple things
Yeah.
and the joy that comes from giving.
Right.
He's trying to awaken Scrooge's heart
Yeah.
to the needs of others.
Yeah. And Tiny Tim,
Tiny Tim
he's so important
is.
because he's innocent
Yeah.
and he's suffering
Right.
and he challenges Scrooge's whole worldview
Yeah.
that it's all about money
Right.
and power.
Right.
Tiny Tim shows them
Yeah.
that love is more important.
Right.
And Tiny Tim says, he told me coming home that he hoped the people saw him in the church
Yeah.
because he was a cripple. And it might be pleasant to them to remember
Yeah.
upon Christmas Day who made lame beggars walk and blind men see. He's like this little Christ figure
Yeah.
showing Scrooge the true meaning of Christmas.
Yeah.
And Bob Cratchit.
He's the one who works for Scrooge.
Right.
And he's treated so badly,
Yeah.
but he still has this quiet dignity and love for his family.
Right.
And that challenges Scrooge because it shows him
Yeah.
that love is stronger than oppression.
Yeah. And Fred.
Oh, yeah, Scrooge's nephew,
Yeah.
he's always so joyful
Yeah.
and welcoming, even.